I see the legacy of those daytime talk shows all around us, even though the original impetus that like gave us that style of communication is a has-been and you know, will never be what it used to be.
As we get ready to count down to 2026, after a surreal year dominated by new heights of political trash content, let's travel back to a time when the trash belonged to the people. For this episode, I am joined by Ross Benesch, author of the book 1999, the year low culture conquered America and kickstarted our bizarre times. Together, we revisit the year of our Lord, 1999, and discuss what popular culture was like at the turn of the millennium, and how things like Juggalos, professional wrestling, boy band rivalries, new metal, Jerry Springer, teen movies, the tech bubble, and the fear of the end of the world predicted the uncanny hyperreality we find ourselves in today. I'm your host, Chelsey Weber-Smith, and this is American Hysteria. I am so excited to be going down memory lane today into what I think is probably my personal favorite year of popular culture, for better and for worse. And I am just really excited to do this with you, Ross. Thank you so much for being here.
Hey, it's great to be here.
Awesome. So you wrote this really fascinating book called 1999, The Year Low Culture Conquered America and Kickstarted Our Bizarre Times. And as soon as I heard that title, I was like, yes, we've got to get Ross on the show. So we're going to be talking about all things 1999 today and how it sort of predicted some of the places that we find ourselves today. And I would love to just start by asking you, Ross, why 1999? Why did you decide to put so much effort into understanding this particular year?
Well, I noticed a lot of things in our national politics and just in our culture in recent years that would harken back to crazy stuff that I consumed in the 90s, whether it was like the kayfabe of Trump era or the collectible stuff that was going with NFTs reminded me of Beanie Babies. There was just like a handful of those moments that made me go back and re-examine the 90s. And then I chose 99 rather than 98 or 2001, because that was just the craziest year. Like pop culture was just the most wild that year compared to the other years in that era.
Absolutely. And you were born, I remember the book said, I think 8 months before 1990. So you were born in 1989. And I did my little month math, and I am about 6 months older than you. So we are very close in age. So we were going through probably very similar pop culture experiences. And I think to start, like I have always found 1999 to be the best, or at least most, like the most prolific, in a sense, year for movies. So if you don't mind, I just wanted to read this little master list of movies from 1999 very quick to like orient us in time. Okay, so we've got Drop Dead Gorgeous, The Blair Witch Project, Cruel Intentions, Dick, But I'm a Cheerleader, Fight Club, The Matrix, Girl Interrupted, She's All That, 10 Things I Hate About You, Never Been Kissed, Toy Story 2, American Beauty, American Pie, Can't Hardly Wait, Varsity Blues, Rushmore, Jawbreaker, Idle Hands, Austin Powers 2, Eyes Wide Shut, Virgin Suicides, The Sixth Sense, The Talented Mr. Ripley, Teaching Mrs. Tingle, The Mummy, Blast from the Past, Office Space, Smart House, Star Wars Episode 1, and the South Park movie. Are there any important ones that you think I left out?
I love The Green Mile and The Iron Giant.
Oh, God. Jeez, two huge ones. They just keep on coming.
It's hard to be comprehensive with a year that fabulous.
I know, that's exactly right. So I think that it would be interesting if we wanted to start with some of what you feel like were the most monumental parts of popular culture in 1999. Like, what's your first thought, best thought?
Well, I love the trashy stuff.
Yeah.
And so my first thought is the pro wrestling wars with WCW and WWF, because it was so much more popular then than it is now in the US. Like, they were the highest rated shows on cable TV. And that's not for everyone. You know, that's very much like a young male thing. But
I was into it. Don't worry.
Yeah. It crossed over, right? Like with The Rock and Stone Cold. Like it was in popular culture in a way that it wasn't previously. So that and then the pop groups like the Spice Girls and Backstreet Boys and NSYNC. I feel like the girl and boy groups were really prominent then, selling a lot of CDs, which doesn't exist anymore.
Yeah. I mean, Spice Girls, that was my first concert. It was incredible. And I would have been, like, I don't know, 9 or 10. It probably would have been a little before 1999. And when I think about wrestling and how you're saying it crossed over, I feel like a great example of that is that one of my favorite toys around this time was a The Rock doll that had, I've talked about this on the show for some reason before, but it had like a removable leopard print shirt, and it was just a real, that was probably not something that a ton of boys were buying, but who knows? I'm not sure. Maybe that was the doll for boys. But yeah, I think that we can also look at something that I had completely forgotten about was the fact that it was the nu metal band Limp Bizkit that MTV chose to usher in the year 1999, singing Prince's Party Like It's 1999, of course. So we're also in this era of boy bands and girl bands, but, we're also in this era of nu metal and these really thrashy, angry, disaffected boy groups that are underground in a way, but are really breaking through into mainstream popular culture, which culminates, I think, in Woodstock 99. So I'm interested in how you think nu metal was affecting the culture at large and maybe the direction that we were going in 1999.
Yeah, so nu metal, the way it was marketed was almost as a reaction against the popularity of boy bands. Like if you would watch TRL, you'd have all these like guys that are like, NSYNC sucks. Put Nookie number 1, whatever. Freak on a Leash by Korn. Like the guys who were really into that really hated the pop music. Not everyone, but like what you would see on TV. But yet it was the same record companies in many cases selling, the biggest record companies in the world, pushing nu metal and pushing the boy groups. But they'd be pitted as like adversaries almost. And it was like, it was aggressive form of music for sure. But it was really appealing to kids at that age. I mean, especially boys. I was a Limp Bizkit fan. I had chocolate starfish in the hot dog flavored water, and used to listen to Rollin'. It combined like rock and rap in a really silly way. At the time, I probably didn't think it was silly, but they melded genres that were already popular to kind of create this like bastardized new thing, which is, mocked in today's parlance. But, at the time, it was considered quite trendy. Those bands did fairly well. And you mentioned they headlined Woodstock, which was a complete disaster for a myriad of reasons. And that sadly has probably been their most defining legacy for Limp Bizkit especially.
Which is so unfair because it really wasn't their fault.
When you have people drinking poop water and like living on a tarmac that's 100 degrees, like that festival was so poorly planned. Those same bands played at Ozfest and the Sanitarium tour.
And things were fine, I imagine.
The chaos didn't erupt as bad as it did in upstate New York.
Well, you also mentioned in your book the fact that, and I just feel like this isn't talked about a lot in like the million documentaries and podcasts I've listened to about Woodstock 99, which is like a minor obsession I have. They don't usually mention that the Insane Clown Posse
whoop, whoop.
was, yeah. And maybe I should say Insane Clown Posse, right? I shouldn't say the Insane Clown Posse.
Whichever.
Oh, thanks. You're giving me permission. I appreciate that. That they played at Woodstock 99. And like, I think they just got outstaged by some of the more outrageous and dangerous things that happened. But I watched some of their set and it was wild. Because they had also gotten into pro wrestling this year a little bit, and they were like pile driving a cop, like obviously like a fake cop, a kayfabe cop. But it was just, when you're talking about wrestling, we're talking about the rise of the Insane Clown Posse, and we're talking about Woodstock 99. I mean, these things all come together and play off each other in this, low culture boil, it seems like.
Yeah, it was a perfect year for ICP to get as popular as they'd ever been. Like their album Amazing Jekyll Brothers comes out in 99. It's top 5 Billboard charts. That gives them 2 platinum records. Like they were such an underground thing before, but because pro wrestling and new metal are popular at that time, they play into that. Like they are on WCW and WWF, and they have their own independent wrestling circuit. And then like when these new metal things pop up, they get a play on that circuit too. And they never like got to be as mainstream as like Limp Bizkit. They didn't sell as many albums as that, but they became nationally known at that time in a way that they weren't, 3 years before.
Yeah. And then they sparked their little moral panic, FBI gang panic. So that was, it was a crazy year. What other like cultural, political moments would you point to as really important during 1999?
Well, this sounds silly, but if we're talking about end of year things, the mass retirement of Beanie Babies, I found very interesting. So, for those who are unfamiliar with Beanie Baby lore, leading up to the end of the millennium, Ty Inc. says, we're going to retire all the Beanie Babies. They're not coming back. Got to get them now while they're hot. And that, people just go like crazy. They're mass buying them and reselling them. But it didn't work the way they wanted it to. They eventually had their reselling go down after the mass retirement. People kind of got tired of the fad. But I find that to be important because it showed like just how capitalistic that whole thing was and how crazy, like the mania was apparent when you could just mass retire something to send people into a market and into a panic. I see that whenever there's some new fad that catches on and there's this inorganic push to make it happen. It just makes me think of like Beanie Babies. Look, that's probably not as serious as of a moment as you're thinking of, but that's like a key 1999 moment for me.
I think that's pretty key. Yeah. I mean, it was, again, we're talking about 1999 as this nexus point for low culture. And I would say Beanie Babies very much fit in that category. Did you collect Beanie Babies?
I had a few. I wouldn't know if I'd be counted as a collector because I didn't have like a attic full of them like some people did. Yeah. But I had Bones the dog. I had Rainbow, which was a multicolored lizard. I had probably like 5 or 6, and I actually have more now, strangely enough, because people have gifted them to me and I let my kids play with them. Did you have any?
That's very sweet. I did have, I feel like I had a shit ton, but Bones the dog remained my favorite for sure. I actually lost Bones the dog. This is something I talk about when we did our Toy Riots episode, but I lost my Bones the dog. This is so like not 1999, but very 90s. I lost him within the giant ball pit at Chuck E. Cheese.
Oh, God.
And
probably still in there.
No, I searched, Ross. And then I left like crying. And finally my dad was like, we're going back. And I found him in that ball pit. And I just triumphantly, launched it over my head like, I got it. So Bones always holds a special place in my heart. But yeah, and then we have like just like the bizarreness of the Princess Diana Beanie Baby. And it was a really weird time. And it was a time too, interestingly, that like children's things became adult things. Right? Because we're so like childified is a word I'm going to make up at this point. I think adults, myself very much included. But I hadn't really thought about that till this moment of, perhaps starting with like Cabbage Patch and Atari and these older things. But like there was a sense of adults enjoying more childlike things, even if for their speculative economic possibilities.
Oh, it's definitely an adult fad. I think the adults thought about and interacted with those toys more than the kids did for Beanie Babies, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, I thought of one other moment from 1999 that's actually more significant in a serious way.
Yeah.
Well, it's two moments, but I think they're related. TiVo and Napster come out. And
yes.
Huge shakeup in media distribution and how we consume entertainment, all stemming from that year. The repercussions are still with us in all the streaming services and file sharing we do today.
Let's talk a little bit more about Napster. Would you want to just give us your perspective on how that went down and how it's changed things?
Well, you know, Napster blows up in 99.
And maybe we should say for anyone younger, just really quick, what Napster is. It's clear for most of us, I'm sure, but I don't know for everybody.
Well, for young people, if I need to paint the scene, before Napster, you would buy a CD for like $15 at Sam Goody or Best Buy or wherever.
Yep.
And, you know, CD burners came out where you could copy your CD for a friend. And you could always do that with cassette tapes beforehand. But you couldn't just get like the individual song. You want just one song. You want to have it on your computer. But that was harder to do until Napster came and let people file share. So if I uploaded my CD collection and, you know, millions of other people around the country did the same, we could grab from each other, and I could go get like Enter Sandman by Metallica if I needed, or I could go get, you know, Wannabe by Spice Girls, and I could then make playlists, or I could make a CD with like all these different specific songs on it, which you know, is so normalized now. You just go to Spotify and pick everything you want, you know, with a click. That's not how it was in the 90s. We used to use physical media and like have to, you know, skip through to find our songs and have to purchase shit. So Napster is a real threat to the record labels because they're not going to sell as many CDs when people can get it for free. So they sue them, and Napster loses, and the company dissolves very quickly after really changing the way people see the internet. But its legacy lasts because after Napster blows up, like Kazaa and LimeWire and a million other sites like that, Pirate Bay, like it's not just music anymore. It's like every form of entertainment, movies, you know, TV shows, whatever. File sharing's like the cat's out of the bag with Napster. That's how I see it. They were unsuccessful. Their business got squashed, but they opened up the possibility to peer-to-peer networking and to like, you know, building media consumption based off of your own interest of specific songs rather than like what's piped into you from a you know, commercial radio network.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, like you said, it's kind of like once we knew we could have that as a culture, we were not going to go back.
Yeah. You can kill Napster, but you can't kill that idea. There's going to be another one.
Yeah. You can't kill the dream, for better or worse. That does speak to this moment, I think, that the internet really gave to us of, and you kind of mentioned this, like no longer are we being completely dictated to about what we should be consuming? Like there is this ability to start to personalize your own media that you consume. And it lasted for, you know, quite a while after this, probably until like the early 2010s with streaming. But we were starting to lose mass culture as we had known it, that we were all sharing at the same time. And I do think that you can point to something like Napster and then, of course, eventually Netflix as these companies that allowed us to have a more personalized experience of popular culture.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, at this point, outside of a few sports like the NFL, we don't have a lot of shared cultural moments. You know, even if you take a top streaming show like Stranger Things is really popular, it's still not like watched by most of the population. You know, It's not like a Friends episode in like, you know, the late 90s that everyone saw at some point or was familiar with. You know, it's just everything's so fragmented, which I think it has some good qualities and bad qualities. But the 90s is because you still had that like water cooler moment. You still had mass media that reached everyone. You know, it's a double-edged sword. You have stuff like Jerry Springer and, you know, pro wrestling are more popular at that time than they ever would be otherwise. But, now, even though things, you don't have that shared moment, you can at least have something to your specific interest if the mainstream isn't hitting that. But it's tough to find people that watch the shows you watch sometimes.
Yeah, absolutely. And another thing we really shared that is important to this year, whether or not we shared it in like a week by week basis, that remains to be seen. But we all shared, when we're homesick from school, what are we watching? We are watching Jerry Springer, right? We're watching like the worst stuff that's maybe ever been on television. I mean, the one I never forget, and I'm so sorry to even say this, but is like the one that's like a mother and daughter that are proudly in a relationship with each other, like an adult daughter and mother. And, I just remember watching that with just like my mouth hanging open, like how, even as like a 10, 11-year-old, like how is this on TV? B, how am I watching this right now? And it's just like I can pop it on the TV and we're ready to go. So I mean, obviously, so much has been talked about when it comes to reality TV and how it has affected our culture. And I mean, speaking specifically about trash talk shows too. Can you give us your overview of how you think that kind of set us on a particular course?
Yeah. So like Jerry Springer and all those shows from that era, Ricky, Montel, Sally, Jesse, there was like a dozen of them. Springer was the most outrageous, but it was definitely a format that many had copied.
Yeah.
They were like the prototype for what would become reality TVs. Like reality TV existed at that point. There was the Real World and Road Rules, and like Survivor would come a year later in 2000. But when you saw it really come into its own, like 5 or 6 years later with like the Housewife shows and the Kardashians, they're taking the strong reactions and engineered moments from talk shows and just putting it into a new format. Like, I just don't think the Osbournes and Kardashians and those shows would be around if they didn't have the template set by Jerry Springer and Ricky Lake in these talk shows. And then today, like daytime talk is mostly dead. Like very few people are watching the Drew Barrymore show compared to, what watched talk shows in the 90s. But its legacy lives on in, the catty and bitchy ways that people fight with each other on social media today. Like, the way the president claps back at anyone, like that's very much Springer-esque. So I see the legacy of those daytime talk shows all around us, even though the original impetus that like gave us that style of communication is a has-been and will never be what it used to be.
Yeah. And I mean, I think, not to say that Oprah is necessarily high culture, but I think that you could argue that it was a much higher level of culture, or it attempted to be, than Jerry Springer, and it had been around for quite a long time. But in 1999, you mentioned that Jerry Springer actually overtook Oprah in ratings. And I think that right there is a perfect example of what you talk about in your book of low culture really taking over this year.
Well, Jerry Springer's producer, the way he put it was, if you want to save the whales, call Oprah, but if you're sleeping with the whale, call us.
Jesus Christ.
That's how he distinguishes between the shows.
That's it. That is a perfect quote for 1999 for so many reasons. I think that something that I've always found interesting about 99 is this tug of war between like teen girl culture and teen boy culture, because this year, some of the movies that I mentioned are like some of the best teen girl movies ever made. But we also have American Pie kicking off, and we also have new metal, as we've mentioned. We also have things like the Tom Green Show coming. We're like right on the precipice of Jackass. Yeah. Like the boys are coming back after our like third wave feminism, Spice Girls, girl power 90s. And that friction, I think, as we've mentioned, was so apparent in 1999. What do you see as like some of the gender changes, the ideas around gender and kind of the conflicts of 1999? How do you see that unfolding and then like playing out as we go forward?
Well, all those examples you mentioned, it's very clear what shows are marketed for like teen girls and what shows are marketed for teen boys. And in the 90s, there was more money put toward teen entertainment than there had been before. Like teens at that point were bigger than the baby boomer generation, just in terms of sheer volume. They were spending more on media. So like whether it's, Sabrina the Teenage Witch or Dawson's Creek, or it's, you want to talk about cinema and it's all those movies you mentioned, or music, it's Backstreet Boys and Spice Girls and NSYNC, Britney Spears. Like the teen entertainment was at the top of the charts. It was at the top of the box office. It was at the top of the TV ratings. And that's kind of a little unusual. There's always been teen entertainment, but like in the 90s, it was just more prevalent and heavily marketed. And it was like the teen girl stuff was like all sexy young women, whether it was TV shows or music, they definitely had like a certain look. And the teen boy stuff was either like, really raunchy or really aggressive, or a combination of the both. That kind of was the way that they were pushed at that time. There's some examples, like Daria comes to mind as being a little androgynous.
Yeah, that's a good example. Yeah.
But what was more common was like Beavis and Butthead, which is what, Daria originally originated from.
Right. Yeah. And earlier on when you were talking about nu metal kind of coming out of the same places that pop music was coming out of in terms of record labels, there's almost like this gendered controlled opposition happening in the industry where it's like, girls get to love this and like scream and cry about these bands, but don't worry, boys, we have something for you so that you can hate on that thing that you think is annoying. And we're still going to make money off of all of you in different ways. Yeah.
Manufactured beef.
There we go, man. And we see it today, don't we?
Like, even if you take out the gender part and you look at some of the other beefs, like NSYNC and Backstreet Boys, appealing to like the same fan base. And they like made it as a rivalry or a feud, but they had the same label and the same manager who actually was a con artist. If you ever look up the guy who managed them, he's complete fraud. But
yep, of course, yeah.
But like all the money was going to the same place, but they were like selling it as like, well, you want to, if you're a Backstreet person, like you can't be an NSYNC person, you can't support them, Yes. Even though it sounds like very similar.
It's very similar, yes. NSYNC or Backstreet Boys, Ross?
Yeah, so I'm a Backstreet Boys man and
a Backstreet Boys boy.
I'm a Backstreet Boys boy. I'm a Backstreet boy. So I think Backstreet Boys have the depth. Like if you look at their catalog, they have more just great 90s songs than NSYNC, and like their band, I think, had more overall talent and charisma, but they don't have a single star that's anything close to Justin Timberlake. That's
so true. I think I'm an NSYNC, but not for any reason other than like vibes in my heart. Because I do agree about Backstreet Boys being much more talented, but
I love Tearing Up My Heart though. I mean, like those NSYNC songs are great.
Of course. Yeah. And I mean, at the end of the day, I'm a Spice Girls boy. So I do love the Spice Girls. More after this. And now back to the show. Another thing, as we're really doing like a crash course, Remember 99 right now. So another thing we must mention that I know you wrote about, Ross, is the transformation of country music star Garth Brooks into his alter ego, Chris Gaines. Please take us there.
So when Garth Brooks becomes Chris Gaines, the best part about it is the VH1 behind the music of Chris Gaines.
Right.
Like it's presented as if it's a real person, because VH1 at the time had all those behind the musics on every band, and they kind of all had the same formula on their rise and fall and all of their tragedies. And so they do one on Chris Gaines that's, completely fictional. And they have this whole deep backstory. Like he's from Australia and he has sex addiction. So like Garth Brooks is like in his like black wig with his goatee talking about his sex addiction problems that he doesn't actually have, but it's part of his character that he's building as this like
so strange,
different persona. So watching that in especially in hindsight now is like one of the funniest things from the 90s that you can see on YouTube.
Yeah. And it was kind of like this, like almost like emo. I mean, I wouldn't say emo, it was a little early, but like a very moody, dark swept hair. Yeah, like you said, like dark goatee look. It was just like the weirdest thing. How sincere was that? Was he having fun and joking around, or was I just never really got a full picture of the Chris Gaines thing?
Well, so Garth Brooks has always been a huge fan of like pop and rock music. He has cited his biggest influences as Freddie Mercury and Billy Joel. You know, it's not just like Hank Williams and traditional country stuff. He really loves those arena rock gods. And I feel like he was trying to become more like those. He was trying to put the country aside and go into this new direction. He even did an SNL, and it's one of the SNLs where you can't, like, the musical performances are removed because Garth Brooks is super like litigious about copyrights. Like, he's not on Spotify. The Chris Gaines music is actually very difficult to find, even though it charted.
He buried it.
Yeah, he just like buried it. Like, you have to really search to find it. And so he went on SNL where he was Garth Brooks and the musical guest was Chris Gaines.
Oh my God. I didn't realize that.
But if you go on Peacock, the like Chris Gaines part, they're not there. Like, the musical parts are often there if you want to go and watch.
Yeah.
You know,
it's gone.
Yeah, Britney Spears or something. Like, yeah, you watch that episode. It's like 30 minutes instead of 45 minutes, and they just skip the music parts.
It's vanished. It's starting to feel like a conspiracy of some kind.
Did Chris Gaines even exist? You could go crazy looking into it.
Yeah, it's like is it a Mandela effect that we've all had, this mass Mandela effect? It was real. It really happened. God, that's so wild. Okay, so another thing that I don't really understand well, but I think is important to understanding 1999, what came before and what came after, is the effect that like media regulation had or didn't have. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so a lot of the trashy stuff that gains significant prominence in the 90s is due to a series of media deregulations. So if you go back to even the early 90s, there used to be a lot of laws separating what companies could own particular things. Like a film studio couldn't also own a TV network. A cable system couldn't own a telephone company. The most notable is the 1996 Telecommunications Act, but there are several other either laws that are passed or FCC policies that change that eliminate restrictions. So like anyone can own anything. You know, if Viacom wants to partner with CBS, there's no longer a limit on how many TV stations a company can own in a given market, for example. Okay. So it just allowed these mergers to get bigger and bigger. That's why there weren't such significantly large media companies in the 70s and 80s, because regulations kept them separate. But when you get deregulation, just to give you one small example, I mentioned CBS and Viacom. They merge in 1999. It's the largest media merger ever at the time. After that happens, they can take one person like Howard Stern and they can produce his movie, his radio show, publish his books, and rent them out on Blockbuster, which they also own. And they can take like one person and they own all the media, whether it's radio, film, TV, books. And they could turn one person into a star just by like a decision that their executives make, whether the audience demand is there or not. And these giant companies, as they get bigger, they're looking to cut costs. And what that means is they're going to produce content as cheaply as possible. So they're producing, low production quality stuff like reality TV in bulk because it gains viewers and it's cheap, and they have more incentive to do so now because they're so large and debt leveraged. They have to deliver on their investment.
Right. Yeah. And as you mentioned, we had so many very low budget shows starting around here, like around this time. I'm thinking of like Blind Date. Do you remember Blind Date?
Was that an MTV one?
I don't think it was MTV. They are on YouTube, and I do recommend revisiting because it's pretty wild. But it was just like people going on a blind date, like a very simple, goofy date, like, oh, we're going to go paint our bodies and then we're going to go get like absolutely like shit wrecked and, you know, see what happens and to see if they end up making out in the hot tub or, you know, throwing their drinks on each other. Anything can happen. But that show really feels like this important moment of like, that you can get viewership by being as outrageous as possible. And that can be really inexpensive because I think we see that.
Yeah. What did Jackass cost? Like,
I know.
You know, just go have some guys kick themselves in the nuts and jump off things and let animals attack them. And
and I loved it.
I watched it too. I watched all the movies. Cost nothing to produce until they became stars. When they first started making that show, it had to be super cheap.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I mean, we have a Jackass episode that's, I think, fun to revisit about like the rise of skateboard culture and the rise of things like Big Brother magazine that really kind of preceded what we were talking about around the kind of bad boy year 1999 that just showed kind of almost like the disaffected boy who's ready to throw himself off of something just to get a laugh from his buddies. It was definitely a moment. But thinking about this kind of cheapening of culture does remind me of how today companies make so much money just off of outrage, right? Like we've always had media being about sensationalization. That's a tale as old as the written word, right? But I think that this idea that you could act as like uncouth, maybe like as outside of the laws of the society that we have and like the shared agreements of what it means to share a world together. Like we just kind of like blasted through that and kind of exploded that in this time. And from there, if we're talking about the effect, right, we can draw a pretty straight line to outrage culture and to the way that social media algorithms promote the most outrageous points of view and then really kind of confuse us as to the real, like everyday person's experience, thoughts and ideas. And I think that that's a pretty alarming thing that came out of 1999, you know, as a fan. But, you know, we've talked about these kind of alarming trends that really start at that moment.
Yeah, there's a lot of crazy spider webs that come out of the changing consumption of media from the late 90s. The social media stuff, you know, is a little bit later, but they are acting on some of the principles that the talk shows and the reality shows acted on, which is like people can't look away from like unfounded gossip and, you know, just pure craziness. And that's going to get more engagement, which is the term they use, than something that's, you know, truthful or well researched or even well produced. If you give the people what they like in a free market, and a lot of what happened in '99 was a free market due to deregulation, they choose some crazy shit. Yeah, you know, as the technology expands, people like to think we're going to use it for like all these great things, but you know, it's often used for like scams, porn, and strange side hustles.
There you go. The Holy Trinity. Speaking of the Holy Trinity, maybe this would be a good time to talk a little bit about the end of the year and what that brought to us, because in the middle of all of the things that we're talking about is a pretty decent sized apocalyptic panic. So do you want to like take us to the fear of Y2K and how that was being absorbed and then experienced by people, whether they be, you know, someone like us, an 11-year-old kid, or they be like a programmer, or they just be any type of person that may have some kind of specific reaction.
Yeah, I remember Y2K. It was quite strange. Before I get to Y2K, actually, just, you know, earlier when I said was that dating show on MTV, I was thinking of a completely different trashy show called Date My Mom. I don't know if you ever watched that.
Date My Mom. I don't remember that.
I don't think it lasted long. And it was a little after the 90s. That was a one of those salacious MTV dating shows. Anyways, neither here nor there. Yeah. So, so with Y2K, I was 10 years old at the time, and I just like remember there were people who were genuinely freaked out that like the clocks are going to change, the computers can't handle it, planes are going to fall out of the sky, elevators aren't going to work. Anything with electronics is like going to just go haywire, and you're going to have to turn into a survivalist potentially to get through this time as we all figure it out. But, most people that I knew didn't have that belief, even if we saw it on TV. It was just kind of like well, let's just see how bad this gets and what actually happens.
We're kids. We don't have to do anything.
We don't have to do anything. But even my parents and their friends, granted, we weren't like super techie people. We're living in rural Nebraska.
Okay.
But, we're aware of Y2K. We've been hearing about it for 2 or 3 years, but we're not the survivalists that you see on TV.
Right.
And it comes and goes without, like, from our point of view, much of a big deal. I learned years later all the work that was put into making it such a smooth transition, but it turns into a bit of a nothing burger for the way. People had some real genuine panic. And then you had, on top of that, you had like people using that moment for their own purposes, like some like really evangelical pastors, saying like, well, the rapture's coming. And then like you have like Hollywood movies that are being pretty silly about it. There's a movie in 1999 called End of Days with Arnold Schwarzenegger, where they say 666 is actually upside down. It's 999 as in 1999.
Wow.
Antichrist is here.
That's kind of awesome.
Bit of a stretch, but it was kind of cool in the movie. I
like it.
and like, MTV leaned into it with their cheekiness. They had the Bunker Project, where it was like, we're going to like, put together these hot young single people underground in New York City and hope they survive the apocalypse. Tune into our webcam to see what they're up to. So you had a lot of like weird, crazy stuff and people who like half believing in it and using it for their own marketing. So like Y2K became this whole other thing beyond the computers, where it just like represented the insanity of the end of the year.
Yeah. It's like it was refracted through like so many different lenses. God, I didn't know about that MTV thing. That is so wild. The Bunker Project.
If you find like the correct URLs and go to like Web Archive, you can still find some of what they had there, because it was mostly online. Like they would hype it up on the TV network, but they were trying to drive you to MTV.com, which was like going to be this new hip thing. And then they completely botched that and they lost the youth market, 5 years later.
Of course. Yeah, of course. That's so fascinating. And like you said, for kind of the average person, I think there was just a bit of like a tongue-in-cheekness about it, and maybe like a little bit of nerves. Like for people who don't know much about this, what it was is that programmers had kind of cut corners years and years and years before this, because it, saved memory to make the dates on all of their whatever, I'm not good at computers, their programs, 2 digits instead of 4. So once we got to 00, people felt like it was going to reset, or it wasn't going to understand what year it was. Planes were going to fall out of the sky. Medical equipment was going to stop. Really bad stuff.
There were 3 different movies titled Y2K about that type of stuff happening. They were like made for video, straight to video movies.
Yeah. There was like a definite like problem that was, as you said, I learned this years later too, actually solved by like a decade's worth of prior work and like serious and like collaboration in a way that feels hard to imagine today between like different countries.
It's probably the closest we've had to NASA in the 60s, like since then, getting countries to work together to solve something.
Pretty wild, I know. But yeah, I think part of what is interesting about Y2K is I grew up with like prepping in my world. And so I wasn't really paying a ton of attention year 2000, but I would pay attention in 2012 a little bit more. But that's a story that I've already told on this podcast. But I think that through the eyes of a prepper, there was a lot of like Christian, as you mentioned, kind of pre-tribulation rapture talk where it was like, get ready for the year 2000, either you're going to be raptured or you're going to have to go through this tribulation. So people were storing food, building bunkers, really coming back to religion just for like 1 second in a way that was really interesting.
Yeah, on January 2nd, they're like, we don't need to go back to church.
No, it's fine. It's fine. What was I thinking? Like, now I have 12 years of Spam to eat.
That gets you right to 2012.
Yeah. But I think that there was like a serious feeling that the world was ending, which then went through the like teenage lens of like sarcasm, because 99 was like a very sarcastic, like jokey, we are not taking anything seriously, almost like we are expecting the world to end without actually expecting it to end. Because I just think that the attitude of 99 is just so interesting and so nihilistic. And I do think we as millennials have carried through some of that nihilism that also is painted with like a lot of, political activism and care for the future. But there was just this sense that the world was ending in some way for us. And I don't know if that makes any sense. Is that like something that you experienced at all, that kind of nihilism?
Well, I definitely experienced nihilism throughout the 90s. That's probably why I liked so many of the low culture things that I enjoyed, was into destruction and fireworks and all the stuff that little boys like. What I also see though with Y2K is the tech was advancing faster than people's understanding of it was. So computers were starting to be in people's homes. Like in 2000 was the first census where half of US homes had a computer, and they didn't even all have internet, but they just had a computer. Y2K is like really appealing to that fear of like, oh, the technology is like beyond our grasp. It's going to come to get us, kind of like the way some people have with AI now. Like you make these leaps in computing technology, and it doesn't take long for people to be like, okay, it's going to blow up the world. Like it's going to end everything. Yeah. And, I see that tech exuberance, the mania of it is like the .com bubble, and the depressive part of it is the Y2K fear.
Right. And I think that it was also kind of this moment, even though this was always true, and I'm sure that these anxieties were always around with different technologies, but the idea that now, because our world is happening more and more online, because all of our major infrastructure and systems are based on the internet and on, computer technology. I think Y2K was this moment where we kind of realized the deep vulnerability of that as a country, where we're like, man, we have no control over what happens to us in a way now. Like, we're not agricultural. We're not growing our own food. We're not like taking care of our own homes in that way. Like, it's just like this absolute reliance on technology is very nerve-wracking if you stop and think about the fact that, like, if there was this great plug and someone unplugged it, it would just be this absolute chaos. And I think coming to terms with that was part of 1999, and coming to terms with the fact that things would never be the same, which is something that you talk about in your book a little bit. But I think that it's a very appropriate American apocalypse in a way. Like, everything that happened in 99, like, that was the most American we could have made an apocalypse. More after this. And now back to the show. Moving on to kind of after 1999, after Y2K, to most people seems like a bust and nothing happens. But we know behind the scenes, it could have been really, really bad, and they prevented it. So thank you to all of the coders who never got credit. But Y2K did play a hand in what was happening with the .com bubble, and then eventually that bubble bursting. Would you be able to kind of take us there a little bit? Because this is pretty out of my wheelhouse, and I would love to understand better what happened with the bubble and then its subsequent burst.
Well, so the way I see those two related is they're just kind of inverse of each other. Like that Y2K is the technophobia side of it. And the .com bubble is like the techno lover side of it, where there's this just irrational belief in the power of online technology. Because to their credit, it had advanced significantly through the 90s. Like the way the internet was in 1999 was so much more powerful than it was in even like 1995. Very rudimentary compared to today, but they were seeing significant change in a short amount of time. And so with the .com bubble, investors just poured a ton of money into like anything with a .com or some sort of digital sound in its name. And there were some winners, like they were onto something in that, you know, Amazon, Jeff Bezos was like Time Person of the Year in 99. And like,
oh, wow.
You know, clearly they were onto something because he's one of the richest and most powerful people in the world. And Amazon went through that whole cycle. And, you know, there were other companies that are with us today that like started through the .com bubble. But man, there were a lot of them that ran Super Bowl ads, had, you know, multi-million-dollar marketing campaigns that had no chance of ever succeeding. Like Cosmo.com was a grocery delivery service, kind of like Instacart, but like, you know, 25 years before, in a way that the infrastructure wasn't there. And it was like costing them way more to deliver things than what they were charging customers. So they're just losing their ass on every transaction. Same with pets.com, epidemic.com. Like there were just anything on .com could just launch, make millions of dollars, and then implode. And you had these weird, you could see their rationality in the market in that there was a subsidiary of Palm, like Palm Pilots, the little digital device, that was worth way more than its parent company. So what that meant is that the rest of that company was valued at like, you know, negative hundreds of millions of dollars if a subsidiary is worth more than the parent. It just showed how like investors were like looking at something that was digital, not considering the financial fundamentals, that this is actually part of a much broader entity that's actually worth less money than you think the one part is worth.
Sure.
So like you saw a lot of rational investing, and there were cheerleaders like Henry Blodgett, founder of Business Insider, who were, you know, leading analysts who were on TV all the time telling people to buy these stocks. You know, it's like, you got to buy now or you're going to be left out. That was kind of the, don't want to have FOMO. This great new technology is changing everything. Well, by 2001, 80% of that market was completely gone. And most people who spent money in it lost their ass completely.
Yeah. I mean, it's like they were building off like purely ideas and not anything that could actually deliver, you know, like you said, like a grocery store. How is that going to work in 1999?
Yeah, like it sounds great. Exactly.
Yeah.
It sounds great.
But it's not actually possible with the technology. So how do you think then Y2K itself went on to help cause or help aid in some way the future bubble bursting?
Well, it got people really amped up about the internet and you know, technology in general before the investment was all pouring in. I mean, you basically primed people to like, there's this powerful technology that's going to like, you know, destroy the world. And then it didn't. It's like, all right, this powerful new technology is like being used by all these companies. It's going to change the way you do business in your everyday life, you know, invest in these things. So I think it just really primed people to the power of the internet and let their imaginations run wild. And then, you know, they ran wild in a different way in the .com bubble. You know, they were, in Y2K, people were like more doomsday than they should have been. And like the people who bought into the .com bubble were way more hopeful than they should have been. But you can't turn around these things at the speed that they were promised to do so.
And I know that in addition to that, like billions and billions and billions of dollars were invested in preventing Y2K. So it's almost like there's a sunk cost fallacy there where it's like, well, we've put so much money into fixing all of these institutions. Like we better make this the way forward and we better put all of our money into it, lest we waste all of that.
I just want to quote a speech that was kind of insane about, like, if you want to see how investors are being talked to. So the Manhattan Institute is like a right-wing think tank. Like it's more so on the conservative, like on the economic side than on the social issue side. And at their like premier gala, their principal speaker said that those who don't invest in .coms, and this is a direct quote, are doomed to mediocrity by their trust in a kind of spurious mechanistic rationality and by failures of faith.
Wow.
Like it was put into like religious terms.
Yeah.
Like you don't want to be too rational and overthink this.
Yeah.
You need to have faith in the technology.
Well, and what an incredible parallel to right now, where we have Peter Thiel out there saying that people who oppose AI are the Antichrist, right? We have this sense of like, and people who are communicating with AI in a way that's leading to kind of like a religious psychosis. Like there is very much like this sense that you need to have faith in AI when you're talking to proponents of the technology. So it feels like a really perfect parallel. And I know that that goes back, I'm sure that it goes back to things like electricity. Like I bet if we went back, people would be saying similar things and making it into like spiritual terms.
Yeah, there's probably always been a technological messiah. Like I think like Steve Jobs is like the big one. Like if you had to have like a Christ for technology, it'd probably be Steve Jobs. But to your point, I bet people were talking about Tesla and Edison in those crazy ways back then.
Must have been, yeah.
Well, this is kind of a little bit off the beaten path, but did you ever look up Josh Harris or We Live in Public?
No.
So he's kind of a perfect figure to talk about for Y2K and .com, because Josh Harris gets his money from a .com pseudo. It was like YouTube for the 90s. Like everyone's going to, watch all these like user generated videos and it's going to be online and we're going to take over the media world. But we're going to do it in 1999 when, it takes you 35 minutes to download a JPEG sometimes. And he makes a ton of money with this .com that would eventually fail, and he uses it to like live the life of like a very eccentric playboy. And for New Year's Eve 1999, during Y2K, he has this art project called We Live in Public. There's a documentary about it where he has like artists and like socialites and just like people who want to be someone in New York City live underground in this weird, like, it's like very culty. Like it's this like terranium where they wear these matching like prison outfits and they like are given firearms and booze and drugs and they just like have sex and in public, and they have cameras in every room so you can watch every single room. You have no privacy, and he's recording all of it.
Wow.
So you're just there for like a week, like shooting guns, participating in weird religious ceremonies, being given like weird instructions like you're in prison, watching people poop and eat and fuck, and it gets shut down then by the police, and he eventually loses his money and becomes somewhat of a recluse. But he had this like messianic vision where he is like the prophet for the age, and he's going to use this money and show us what world we're really living in. Like he meant it to be a art installation, even though it was more of just like a bamboozle, crazy social experiment.
Yeah, God. It's so weird, man. Really super rich people just, I don't know, man.
They don't know how to handle the money once he falls into it. Like that was like the thing he had to use it for.
I think one day we're going to have a new psychological category of mental illness / personality disorder. And I think that's a good example of part of what we'll be talking about when it comes to billionaires. So, okay, if we are thinking about where we are now with everything we've talked about today, the good and the bad, how do you connect the low culture kind of overthrow of the late 90s? Like, how do you take that, especially in your book, how do you take that and apply it now to kind of our Trumpian age?
Yeah, it is depressing to think about it in that way sometimes, but I know what you're saying. Well, so I don't think the low culture is all necessarily bad though from the late 90s. If you think about like reality TV, it gave people a chance to be in the entertainment field who wouldn't have gotten that chance otherwise. And then it made entertainment that appealed to niche interests that the mainstream was ignoring. But what I think back mostly on its influence is the illusion of presenting something as real, even though it's fake, that was really popularized by pro wrestling in the 90s. I see that every day through the BS like that these tech companies are selling us, or by, you know, some of the things that Trump presents in a strange light. The Jerry Springer stuff, like I said, you see it whenever there's the online cat fights where people are pretending to be their own talk show guests. Yeah. The Beanie Baby stuff, that's with us with all the collectibles, whether it's NFTs or Labubus, sure, or whatever, that, you know, a new fad always comes and pops and people want to get in on while it's getting hot, but you're gonna probably lose your ass. That's always with us. Something we didn't talk about, porn. Boy, that shapes our technology in strange, unusual ways. But one that's really interesting is the Insane Clown Posse. We discussed it a little bit. What I think they do very well, and that, you know, Trump and some of his disciples do quite well, is they make people who perceive themselves as outsiders feel connected to like a broader movement and to each other. So whether you like their particular message or their music or whatever is besides the point. It's that they bring in a community of believers who feel society has it out for them and they bond over that. And I find that very interesting. Yeah. Religions do that, but political groups do that really well too. And like ICP, I feel like perfected that for their little subgroup in the 90s.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, that's a very astute observation for sure.
But just the general gist, though, is just that like the entertainment that we throw away or that we think we're too good for or that we think is shit actually shapes our world in strange and unusual ways, even if it's a quarter century later.
And because these things are, even if for people like you and I who maybe fall in like, I don't know, like I love low art, but I'm also consuming what I guess people call high art. But we have to look at like people that are outside of our world, which is like most people, right? Like most people are part of this like over culture. Like, for example, I've never seen a Marvel movie, but I'm under no like misconception that Marvel isn't shaping our world. You know, and I'm not trying to say it's low art. I know, I don't know. But it's, you know, these things, even if they don't feel big to us, are shaping our culture. And a lot of times those things are the most consumable types of content, which is not a bad thing, but it is something that is so worth analysis because it is affecting everything. The things we forget are affecting everything. And I think, you know, your book and kind of what American Hysteria tries to do is dig up those lost or disregarded pieces of history that actually had a much more profound effect than maybe we even want to admit because we have some kind of embarrassment about it or something. But I am really enjoying your book and I hope people will check it out. And this has been such a fun trip down memory lane. So thank you so much.
Yeah, this is fun as hell. I do this anytime.
Awesome. I love it. Is there one thing that we want to leave? Like, what's one thing we haven't talked about? We don't have to get into it, but something that like you just love from 1999.
Oh, God. I didn't end up having space for it in the book, but I love some of the infomercials.
Oh, yeah. Good one.
And that stuff arises because of media deregulation. Like Reagan lifts the advertising allotment restrictions. So once a TV network can have as many ads per hour as they want, they just make entire shows that are ads. And my favorite one from 1999, and I still watch clips on this on YouTube, is Miss Cleo. I think she's funny as hell.
I knew it. I knew you were going to say Miss Cleo. Yeah. I mean, the call me now for your free tarot reading. Yeah. It'll never leave us. Right.
You know, once you've heard that, that's an earworm that you can't get rid of.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. I'm going to have to say one of mine is the accusation of Tinky Winky being gay made by Jerry Falwell, because I feel like that's another thing we will not get into. But, you know, there was just a lot of culture war stuff happening in 1999 that ended up manifesting in a very 1999 way. So maybe next time.
He was I think Jerry Falwell said that Tinky Winky was a menace and like a threat to the American family or something along those lines.
That's pretty much exactly what he said. So, and on that note, perhaps we will leave 1999. I really appreciate you being here, Ross. This was so much fun.
Oh, thank you.
This was American Hysteria. Make sure you get a copy of Ross's book, 1999, The Year Low Culture Conquered America and Kickstarted Our Bizarre Times. Link in episode notes. If you love American Hysteria and you want to support us and make sure we can continue making this show, you can become a patron at patreon.com/American Hysteria or subscribe on Apple Plus. Not only will you get ad-free episodes, but you'll also get bonus content like Hysteria Home Companion, another podcast that I do with our producer Miranda, where we tell you stories related to the topics we cover or just stories we know that you'll love. You'll also get access to a third podcast that I've been making called Dispatches from the Field, where I talk for about an hour in a stream of consciousness about whatever topic I choose. So far, we've got all my personal ghost stories, and we've got all the weirdest jobs that I've ever had. Again, that's patreon.com/American Hysteria, or subscribe on Apple Plus and join our fun little community. If you go to AmericanHysteria.com, you can also buy some of our merch. 100% of those profits go to the Samir Project, a Palestinian-led mutual aid group who are on the ground in Gaza delivering food and supplies to displaced families. You can also leave us a message on the Urban Legends hotline about a tale that you remember from growing up or one you've heard recently, and we might do an entire investigation about it. American Hysteria's producer and editor is Miranda Zickler. Our associate producer is Riley Swedelius Smith. This episode has additional editing by Kaylee Jasperson, and I'm your host, Chelsey Weber-Smith. Thanks, as always, for listening, and I wish you a happier new year. Have a great week.